Hey guys, welcome back to Ashart Books. So today I'm going to do another recommendation video where I'm recommending books based on a trope, and I'm going to do marriage of convenience or arranged marriage trope. So I mentioned last week this was another one that I did enjoy reading, and a couple of you guys said you would like to see it, so figured I'd go ahead and do it today. So to me, an arranged marriage or marriage of convenience basically just means that two characters are basically forced to be married to get something out of it. Typically both sides, the man and the woman, are getting something from it, whether it's them getting something from it or their families. Typically they're getting money, or they're getting power, or they're getting a better name. Obviously back in the day, an arranged marriage happened very often. So for me, when a historical romance author can take a situation that is very unromantic, two people kind of forced to being married for usually their families, and make it into something that's very romantic and a relationship you're completely rooting for, like that is the best thing ever. So that's why I think I really enjoy it. So most of these are going to be historical romances just because that is when I think most arranged marriages occurred. But I did also include two that are more contemporaries. First one I have to recommend is Devil in Winter by Lisa Kleypas. If you have not read this book, I highly recommend it. So Evie and Sebastian are probably the two most unlikely people for reading the first couple of books in this series. You're like, what? Evie is very quiet. She has a bit of a speech impediment, but she's also a very strong character. And then Sebastian is your eternal bad boy. In the first two books, you kind of despise him. So it's really interesting to see these two characters thrown together. Theirs is definitely more of a marriage of convenience for themselves. It's not necessarily their families, but just its circumstances that throw them together, and trying to see them work through that and fall in love at the end of this book was such a good ride. Like I said, it's one of my all-time favorites. If you haven't read it, highly recommend. Love it. My next recommendation is The Duchess Deal. This was a huge book when it came out. Was it last year or the year before that? But again, if you haven't picked it up, I think this one's great. And this one does marriage of convenience so well as well. So in this book, we have Emma, who is a seamstress, and she's made this dress for a woman. She's very rich, and she never gets paid for it. So she comes to the Duke of Ashbury's house wearing this dress saying, hey, I need to get paid because she's very low on her money. She needs the money. Duke's kind of like, you know what, I'll do you one better. Why don't we get married and you won't have to worry about money ever again? For him, he lost his fiance because she was not a nice woman, and he really just wants to get married, have an heir, and then move on with his life. So that's kind of his offer to her, and it starts off as very much a kind of arrangement and like a business deal, but obviously things change. Duke of Ashbury opens up and a lot of his kind of walls come down, and then Emma really grows as a character as well. I love seeing this relationship come to be. This is definitely a book, but when it starts off, it's not very romantic. I mean, you literally have the main guy character saying, you know what, we'll get married, I'll give you a child, and then you can go live in my house in the country and we don't have to see each other. But it goes from that to one of the most like sweet love stories ever. So love this one as well. Recommendation is Never Seduce a Scot by Maya Banks. And actually the first one in this series, which is In Bed With A Highlander, is fantastic as well. I just don't have a physical copy of that one. But both of them have arranged marriages, or like marriages of convenience. They're kind of the same thing. So in this one, I just loved the two characters. We've got Evelyn and Graham, and Evelyn is known, so this is a Highlander romance, if you hadn't guessed. Evelyn and her kind of clan is known as Touched, which something happened when she was younger that makes her not speak, but she's very much loved and kind of looked after. But in an arranged marriage, she marries Graham, and it's just their story and them kind of coming to know each other. And it's interesting because you'd think that Evelyn would be the one with less power because she is kind of having this bit of a disability where she doesn't speak. But I just did not find it to be the case. I thought that they really shared the power. Graham is the most gruff, kind of manly guy, but he takes such good care of Evelyn. Watching the two of them come together when there is kind of so much that could go wrong. I mean, it's an arranged marriage. They don't know each other. It's mostly for family gain. She doesn't speak, so that is really tough, I think, at first. I just love this. I read this one last year, and I feel like I still think about this one, as well as the first one, In Bed With A Highlander. It was wonderful as well. Okay, so next I have two on my Kindle, and one is a fantasy, and that is Radiance by Grace Draven. I talked about this one not long ago, but this one is definitely an arranged marriage. The two main characters are forced to marry because they're two races, I guess you'd say, want an alliance, and they are not thrilled. Basically everyone from the two different sides are kind of appalled at the two marrying because they look nothing alike. They're kind of, I guess you'd say, like their beauty standards or what they deem as attractive or beautiful are very different. So it's kind of like her marrying like a monster basically, and the same thing for him. Like they don't look at her and think beauty, they think, oh man. So for them it was an uphill battle. But what I loved about this was from page 1, they may not have found each other attractive, but they thought each other, you're a good person. You know, I think we can be friends. We're stuck in this situation. Let's make the best of it and at least be on the same side. Like, let's be friends. Let's work this out. And so that was definitely the first part of the book before there was any romance even involved. But I think that's the way to do an arranged marriage. You know, you have to have alliances. You have to be friends first, and I thought this was done really well. All right, so my last recommendation is a little bit of a twist, and that is A Veil of Vines by Tilly Cole. So I wanted to include this one because I love this book, and I read it a couple of years ago, and I don't think myself or other people talk about it enough. This one has an arranged marriage in it, which is why it's on this list, but the two people that end up together are perhaps not the people in the arranged marriage, but I still wanted to include it because it's so good. This is basically like an Italian fairy tale. Our main character grew up in New York knowing she was always going to marry this certain man who is very wealthy, and he's basically the Italian royal family if there was still an Italian royal family, if that makes sense. In the book, she goes to this vineyard and there she meets Achilles. I think I'm saying his name right. And perhaps it's their love story. I promise you though, this is not a love triangle, and the way they worked it out, I think it was the best for all parties. I loved it. It was such a beautiful story. I really, really highly recommend you guys reading this, especially if you want a bit of like a fairy tale vibe going on, but in modern day. It was fantastic. All right guys, so those are my recommendations for Marriages of Convenience. Let me know down below what your favorite is. This is one that, like I said, if it's done well, can be amazing. So I'd love to know what your favorite is if I didn't mention it here. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.